The College World Series is officially upon us as 4 SEC teams begin the quest in Omaha to reach the ultimate prize. Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Phillips. He is Harrison Fant. We are the Wind-Up, talking all things College World Series at Charles Schwab Field in Omaha, Nebraska. Guys, excited to be here, breaking everything down. Guys, before we get going, make sure you like, subscribe, turn notifications. Check us out via podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us across all social media platforms, as well as our website, SECUnfiltered.com. And we're brought to you by our friends, and our Omaha trip is brought to you by our friends over at MyBookie. Guys, go to mybookie.ag, use promo code SECU at sign up to get a special welcome offer on your first deposit. Guys, they're going to have spreads, they're going to have totals, they've got props, and they've got futures right now we're actually going to talk about in just a couple minutes. So again, that's our friends at MyBookie. Make sure you're making some money during the College World Series with MyBookie at mybookie.ag using promo code SECU to get your special welcome offer today. Guys, like I mentioned, I'm joined, as I have been all season long, by my friend Harrison Fant, who will be boots on the ground with me in Omaha, Nebraska, as things get going on Friday. Harrison, what's going on, my man? Are you as fired up as I am? Spoiler, I know you are. What's up, man?
What's up, Chris? I mean, find me a brick wall to run through. We are 24 hours almost away from being in the holy grail of college baseball, Omaha, Nebraska, covering the College World Series. I mean, you can't be more exciting than that.
Truly, it's one of those things, man, where I am like a little kid on Christmas. I have been all week. Where dude, I was having trouble sleeping Sunday night, just thinking about the fact we're one day closer to Omaha. We're going to wake up on Thursday. We're going to fly out there. We're going to get to see these teams practice. We're going to go to Rocco's. We're going to go to the Drover. We're going to get the full Omaha experience. I know for both you and I, this is going to be the first Omaha experience. So anybody out there, you got any suggestions? You got recommendations? Of course, we're going to be watching a lot of college baseball, but we're going to be in and around the stadium as well, in and around the great city of Omaha. You got any suggestions, recommendations? We will take them. Whatever you got, we'll take it. Harrison, let's go ahead and dive into everything. Like I mentioned, 8 teams will begin the quest on Friday to get to the College World Series finals next weekend, and, of course, battle for the national championship. The field is set, Harrison, and for the first time, I think, since the 1940s, only 2 conferences are represented, the SEC and the ACC, with the field being Tennessee, Texas A&M, Kentucky, and who am I missing? Florida, of course. How could I forget the Gators? And then from the ACC, NC State, Virginia, North Carolina, and Florida State. Your thoughts, I know we talked about this earlier in the week, but your thoughts on that field and your thoughts on an all SEC, ACC College World Series.
Yeah, Chris. I mean, it feels like we have as close to the best teams statistically on paper as possible that we've seen throughout the entire season as a whole, full body work-wise and just talent-wise on paper. I mean, it's unbelievable to have, it feels like an ACC SEC challenge, like they have in basketball kind of early in the season. I mean, historically, I guess you could say it's more so than not the ACC SEC challenge. So, I mean, it kind of fits the script, but this time it's, just the ACC and SEC there, and it's going to be awesome. We're going to get some really, really good, rivalries of ACC clubs that, I mean, aren't huge rivals, but in the respective, ACC kind of dominance, right? And then in the SEC, we're going to get SEC power programs versus going head to head, and it's going to be unbelievable. It feels like every game is going to be filled with high stress, intense moments, intense pitches, down to the wire. Maybe some more walk-offs in Omaha. I mean, it feels like it's going to have everything, and the script's there for it.
You mentioned the best of the best, Harrison, the elites being there. 7 of the 8 in Omaha were top 16 national seeds. I think it's the first time that's ever happened, or maybe the first time since 2013. I think that's right. Either way, it's been a while.
We've got the best of the best this year, don't you?
And by the way, 7 of the 8 top 16. The 8th team, the Florida Gators, who were essentially top 10 all year long. So, I don't think it was a
preseason too.
Yeah, it wasn't a bold prediction to have the Gators in Omaha before the season. As the season went on, that became more and more of a bold take. But I mean, you think about the 8 we have there, with all due respect to the mid-majors and the little guys and the Cinderella stories, you couldn't have asked, I think, Harrison, for a much better field.
Yeah, no, Chris, I feel like you really couldn't. except for maybe some more high caliber arms. You could have asked for at least one of the USA Golden Spikes Award finalists to be in Omaha. I mean, last year we had what, two, if not, we had two of them. They were all three, actually. I believe so. But that was the only thing kind of missing for me from it, was kind of a little bit more high-powered arms, and then Golden Spikes finalist.
No Hagen Smith, no Chase Burns, no Charlie Condon, but we do have some guys named Jack Caglione. No Travis Bazzana, but we do have a guy named Jack Caglione and Vance Honeycutt and Christian Moore and some other guys that I think will be able to carry the torch just fine. As we take a look, Harrison, again at the field, and we mentioned MyBookie, let's look at the MyBookie odds for the winner of the College World Series going into play on Friday. So, guys, as the time of the recording, Wednesday, this is the latest odds. We actually, Harrison, published these on social media on Tuesday. And funny enough, there has already been movement. So as you can see here, these odds, Tennessee sits at plus 260, Texas A&M at plus 330. And of course, guys, if you're not familiar, by the way, these are futures bets. These are prop bets. So if you throw $100 down, this is what you will win if each of these respective teams wins. And of course, guys, these odds can be found at mybookie.ag. Use promo code SECU when you sign up to get that first deposit match and make your bet today. So Tennessee plus 260, Texas A&M plus 330, Kentucky plus 480, North Carolina plus 670, Florida State plus 860, NC State plus 970, Virginia plus 980, and Florida plus 1375. Harrison, what's really interesting about this, again, we've already had movement here, right? The money's starting to come in on some of these different teams. Florida, for example, they were plus 1575 just a day ago. Now plus 1375. So I think some folks seeing the value there. Texas A&M, they were plus 300 yesterday, now at plus 330. I think the injury to Braden Montgomery, some others as well, probably has a lot to do with that. You look at North Carolina, they were plus 760 yesterday. Now they're plus 670. So some folks are starting to see the value there, and UNC starting to feel a little bit better about what North Carolina has. So, Harrison, when you look at these numbers, obviously we've got the favorite in Tennessee plus 260. I'm almost kind of surprised, Harrison, how I'm not surprised they're the favorite, but with the number one overall seed curse and everything, I think you could say it's maybe somewhat of a bold play to take the Vols. But when you look at these props here, when you look at these numbers, where do you see the most value in regards to picking a College World Series winner?
Yeah, Chris. So when you look at the bracket, it at first, seems kind of right. It seems there's a lot of like opportunities here, and I feel like a lot of them initially look like juicy numbers, right? But then we look down, you get more into it. Kentucky's the number 2 national seed, and their odds are worse than the number 3 national seed in Texas A&M. And it feels like a larger margin than you'd expect. Plus 330 for the 3 seed, number 3 national team, plus 480 for the number 2. And then further than that, it feels like kind of tapers off a lot more. It doesn't feel like they're as close as, kind of what we thought or imagined, but that's just kind of the dynamic pricing, I guess you can say, of it. But Florida makes sense just because of the, underdog story that they've had throughout the season as a whole, looking on the outside in, not the talent wise that we've seen all season, that what they have on paper. So I understand that live line movement increasingly well. It makes a lot of sense, but plus 1300, I mean, that's a steep number. I mean, and they have the talent to go out and win it, Chris, is the thing. Like any of the teams in this field obviously have the talent to go win it. That's proven. They've proven it. They're here for a reason. But the Gators, have just as much talent as, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Kentucky, North Carolina. But their prices are way, way different. So it's going to be interesting to see how it kind of plays out and where line movements continue to trend as we get ahead of Omaha and 4 game start.
Harrison, before the season started, I placed a wager on 5 teams to win the College World Series. Well, I'm getting there. I placed a wager on 5 different teams to win the College World Series. A $25 bet on each of these 5 teams. Arkansas, Texas, Wake Forest, LSU, and yes, the Florida Gators. Obviously, Florida is the only one left standing.
Who would have thought?
I got those odds at plus 1,000 on Florida. $25 to win $250. And I made that bet through MyBookie. I got to be honest with you. as somebody who's already got a Florida ticket, I almost feel like I should throw another 25 on Florida just for the heck of it. Because I'm telling you, I get why they're plus 1375. I get it. I get it. They're a long shot. People are thinking they're going to run out of steam. But, dude, like, you almost have to just completely forget what Florida did this regular season. You kind of have to just wash it away. And, Harrison, like, if I would have told you on February the 13th or February the 10th, before the season started, like, hey, this is the Omaha 8. Who do you like? Who's your favorite? Maybe you wouldn't have said Florida number 1, but I guarantee you'd have said Florida 2 or 3. Like, if you take all that, and I know it doesn't work that way. I know it doesn't work that way. I'm just saying, though, like, to your point, Florida's got all the pieces, dude. And they are on a run. This feels like Ole Miss 2022. This feels like Team of Destiny vibes.
They've won 9 straight Super Regionals. No team's ever done that.
Right. And I'm not saying 100%. Like, guys, we're going to go through picks. Next week, we're going to make picks. Like, I'm not saying that Florida's a guarantee to win it all, but I'm just saying, just in case, I don't think it's a bad idea to sprinkle, even if you put $10 on them, like just something, because Florida could make a run, I think. When I look at the rest of the board, though, Harrison, I agree with you on Kentucky plus 480. I think Kentucky's still being slept on. I think that's a good play. I think North Carolina plus 670. I really like their ball club. I think Virginia, right? You're talking about value. I think Virginia all the way at the bottom at plus 980. I mean, they swing it as good as anybody in this tournament. If you want to go
everything, why not?
Right. I mean, why not? Right. I mean, there's a lot of them to like. I mean, they're all good. They've all got a shot. I would stay away from Texas A&M Harrison, admittedly. Just because I'm curious what they're going to look like without Braden Montgomery. I know it's next man up and all that, but that's a massive loss for them. So, but when I'm looking at value, I'd sprinkle some on Florida, and I'd lean on Kentucky and Virginia as like value plays. I know Tennessee's a favorite. I'm not saying Tennessee doesn't have a great shot to win it all, because they do. But in regards to value, Kentucky, Virginia, Florida, that is where I would lean.
Yeah, Chris, man, that's not a bad idea at all. I mean, I'm not a college betting man by any sense of means, but here, pull that back up real quick. My value,
okay.
Yeah, the value that I really like, and where I see, strong opportunity to make some good, pocket change, if you will. The value I like is North Carolina plus 670. Just the ball club and well-roundedness they have as a whole on both sides, and then how they've played throughout the year. Scott Forbes is, he's not new to this. He's a very, very, very mature veteran coach. Virginia plus 980. And with how much their pitching is stepped up, led by Jay Wolfert, former UVA quarterback, now focused on the mound. 980 for
Virginia, and Virginia is no stranger to this stage. They are no stranger.
They've been here, it feels like 5 of the past 6 or 7 years. They won it, was it 2015? And they lost it. They lost the championship to Vanderbilt and then won it and then lost. I can't remember which year. So they almost went back to back in the past 10 years. I mean, that's legendary stuff to be in Omaha that many times. I mean, no stranger to them. Brian O'Connor is one of the best coaches in the country, and their whole staff around him as well has done a fantastic job with Kevin McMullen as well, who is just one of the best, I think, assistant coaches and recruiting coordinators in the country. Plus 980 is a really good number for them. So those are kind of the two to focus on for me. I mean, I'd stay more away from NC State at plus 980 just for me in the style. I mean, I think they proved a lot, but I just think Virginia's caliber of their club and consistency and plus 980, I think it's a little bit better number. So those are the two, North Carolina and Virginia for me.
Yeah, I like those two. And I know we're an SEC show, but the ACC, the national champion, very well could be. And we most likely, well, I say most likely, there's a good chance, there's a decent chance we could get an all SEC ACC final. I think Tennessee in bracket 1 will have a lot to say about that. Hey, speaking of the bracket, Harrison, let's get the bracket pulled up here. Let's talk the bracket as a whole, the way that it sets up here. So we've got the bracket 1, bracket 2, North Carolina, Virginia getting us going, Tennessee and Florida State in the late game on Friday. Then Saturday, you got Kentucky, NC State, and Texas A&M Florida. Your thoughts on the way the bracket shook out, Harrison? Obviously, we've got kind of the opposites on each side, right? On bracket 1, we've got 1 SEC team, 3 ACC teams. On the other side, we got 3 SEC teams and 1 ACC team. Your thoughts on the bracket as a whole, and then each side of the bracket 1 and 2.
Yeah, Chris. I mean, first I have to mention, I think ESPN does a great job of their graphics, and like this one, for
Shout
example,
out to
just
them. Shout out
shout
to
out
them.
to ESPN, the graphics crew there. A lot of people there that do those things, and I think it's a really good visual because you get to see it as a whole because it can be confusing, right?
Mm.
But you get the times as well too, and just kind of how it works out. Because the Hoover bracket was really confusing with how teams bounce around there. That was just a headache to look at. But this was it's very streamlined. It makes sense. That being said, bracket one, the top bracket, feels like Tennessee's, going to a new bar, hanging out with some new friends, all ACC friends. And then, the same thing for NC State, going to an SEC bar, hanging out with all those guys. And I think it's a really well balanced. I mean, yes, you would have liked for, 2-2 and 2-2 of each bracket from each conference, but I'm just glad it's not, four ACC teams all in one and then four SEC teams all in one. I think you couldn't have asked for, better. I guess you could have made 2-2, like I said, but I think feels really evenly kind of dispersed amongst the styles of play as well. Just the offense in the upper kind of part of the bracket, but there's some pitching side too there. But then in bracket two with Kentucky, NC State, Texas A&M, Florida, it's a good balance as well of hitting and power hitting and pitching. So it's really, really balanced for me, and I'm really glad to see how it kind of shaped out.
Harrison, I think Tennessee actually got a gauntlet. I think that the entire field is elite, as we've talked about, but I think Tennessee being surrounded by North Carolina, Virginia, and Florida State, I think, probably a lot of our audience has not watched much ACC baseball this year. And I'm not going to sit here and say I've watched a ton, but looking into those teams, I mean, North Carolina, Virginia, and Florida State, that's as good as you're going to get. So I'm not saying that bracket two is weak by any means, because it's not, but would you agree or disagree? Like, I think bracket one is actually a more difficult slate than bracket two is for a team going through it. Would you agree or disagree?
I slightly agree, and it's for me leaning towards Tennessee being in it because if you think about it, they're in a bracket with three teams that they haven't really seen at all this year. If you're playing with two other SEC teams, you've seen them, you've faced them, you know what works, you know what doesn't. You have that experience against them. It feels like kind of a rematch. So you get a taste. So obviously, it's hard to lose to a team, 2-3 times, right, in a row, or beat a team 2-3 times in a row. So having that faux familiarity for me is huge. And so Tennessee and then in bracket one and then NC State in bracket two kind of are at that disadvantage in that respects. But I think for Tennessee, the biggest thing is North Carolina, Virginia, and Florida State can all swing it with the best of them. Can very much swing with the best of them. And in the SEC, it's like that, but it feels more, balanced with power arms and power bats. But with this bracket one, it feels like it's going to be a slugfest.
You mentioned Harrison, that familiarity. I mean, you think about it, Florida and Texas A&M, that was the first SEC series of the year for both those clubs. I mean, Florida and Kentucky, Texas A&M and Kentucky, these teams all played. So to your point, you won't have to do much of and these teams have changed, obviously, but you won't have to do too extensive of a scouting report. You can just go back and pull up the file that you had a couple weeks ago. So I think, to your point, I agree with you. I think the familiarity or the unfamiliarity for Tennessee on their side of the bracket could pose some challenges. I think they can obviously handle it, but I do think it could pose some unique challenges for the Volunteers. Harrison, as we look at the bracket, I'll ask you this. So who is your favorite going in? So just to give the spoiler for you guys, by the way, we're not going to predict all the way through like a national champion or anything like that on today's show. Next week, of course, we will preview the College World Series final. But we are going to make some picks here later in the show for these first round games on Friday and Saturday. But Harrison, when you look at it right now, is there a way you lean where you feel like you've got a favorite going in? Is there a team you look at right now, the way the bracket's set up, the way the matchup's set up? Who's your favorite in your mind to win the whole thing right now?
Yeah, Chris, this year, as much as any other year, I think it's really hard to say that and do that because of how strong and compelling of cases each of these teams make. And in the caliber of players that they have, the season that they've had, and just the recency of how well they've played to get here, right? So you can make a case. We can sit here and make a case for each team, Chris. North Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee, Florida State. We can go all the way down the board, make a case for each team. It's really hard to bet against Tennessee, like in theory, because of how good and how high of a caliber they've played all year, better than anyone else, right? They're the number one team in the country for a reason. But then if you like statistics, note the number one team entering the tournament has never won it in this century. Since 1999, it was Miami, the Hurricanes. It was the last number one overall seed to win it all. So I think that does play in the back of your mind. I mean, it's really tough to bet against Tennessee is the thing. So looking at it going in, other than losing AJ Russell, they're very healthy, they're deep, and they have a fantastic head coach. But I mean, all the coaches in here are fantastic too.
So who would you lean to? Did you have? I'm not asking you to make a pick. I'm just saying, does your gut lean one way or another? Where that's the favorite you look at is like that's in your mind. That's the team you would deem as like the favorite right now to win it all. Would it be the Tennessee Volunteers?
Yeah, Chris, it has to be the Tennessee
Yeah.
Volunteers just because they haven't really slipped up at all this year, it feels like, except for the Evansville game too, when they lost and just kind of felt lackadaisical and, kind of put it in cruise control. I mean, other than that, they've proven it week in, week out, series in, series out, 1 through 9, on the bump, in the bullpen. They've proven it in all aspects of the game. But I mean, also with that slip up with Evansville, they overcome it in game 3 and blow them out. That's kind of, I don't want to say a reality check, but kind of a, hey, let's get our heads back on a swivel. Let's keep it on a swivel, right? Let's lock back in and motivation going forward for them. And then, Tony Vitello, the motivation that he brings to the club and to the press room, it's incredible. And it's tough to, go against. That's the thing. So a club that's, Chris, a club that's led by Tony Vitello is hard to bet against.
Harrison, when I look at the bracket, the number 1 overall seed, the curse of that. Is it a real thing? Is it not? So when I'm talking favorites, I don't know for me. I think somebody's going to break this eventually, right? And it's crazy that it's gone on 20.
Records are meant to be broken.
Records are meant to be broken, right? It's insane that truly that it's gone on as long as it has. It really doesn't make any sense at all. With that, though, I don't know if my gut is telling me maybe Tennessee is not the pick. Before the Braden Montgomery injury, I was all in on Texas A&M. I might still be. For some reason, my gut tells me Texas A&M. I think they're as complete as anybody. I think they're right up there with Tennessee with how complete they are. You know what? I'll go Texas A&M. Even with the Braden Montgomery injury, they've still got Jace Lavalette and a full. I mean, they're as deep as anybody in that lineup.
Even with the Shane Sado injury as well that just came out this morning.
Yeah. Yeah.
With one of their starters who's emerged from the bullpen, a sophomore, probably one of the premier arms in the 2025 draft. The incredible year he's had coming out of the bullpen, I think over 20 appearances in the bullpen, 5 starts. He's 5-1 with, a sub-3 ERA. He has been dominant on the mound, just a power lefty. He's not going to overpower you with like upper 90s, but just the maturity he has as a sophomore pitching in that role, in that spot, and be able to do versatile things, So if you have him, he could have come out of a pin. He could have pulled Madison Bumgarner. Start game 1, start game 4, and come out and get pin in game 7. He has that versatility, but to lose that with the struggles it feels like they've had around the pitching staff as well, it's concerning for me.
And that's fair. I just, for some reason, again, I'm going with my gut here. I'm going to stick with that pick of Texas A&M, even with the injuries. I think they're deep enough to overcome it, which says a lot. I love their back into the bullpen still. I love their starting pitching. I think they're built to win. And I know they didn't show this in Hoover, but that's Hoover. This is the College World Series. I think they're built to win in a tournament like this. I like their matchups as well. I think, their side of the bracket, I think, is manageable for them. So my favorite, again, this is not my pick, but my favorite going in, I will go with the Texas A&M Aggies. I'm going to roll with that for some. I'm on that one. That one in my gut, I feel good about it. Now, how about sleeper, Harrison?
And understandably so. But looking at the analytics of it, Tennessee has the best chance to win, obviously, the highest percent, 24% chance to win. That doesn't really surprise anyone, I don't feel like. Second is 19% is Texas A&M. Third, Virginia at 16% chance. Fourth, Florida State at 13% chance. Fifth, North Carolina at 9%. Sixth, Kentucky at 8%. Seventh, Florida at 7%. And eighth and last, NC State at 3% chance. That's to win it.
Wow. 3% for NC State. That's interesting. Very interesting. So speaking of that, Harrison, dark horse. Who's your sleeper? Who's your dark horse that you think could win it all and sort of upset the field, if you will?
Yeah, Chris, for me, it has to go right to the number 3 team analytics-wise that has a chance to win it. From what the numbers I've studied and looked through, Virginia Cavaliers. And I think it's the resurgence and surgence of their pitching staff to complement and support the elite power offense that they have, and especially when we looked at the lines, they're plus 980. Talk about value with a team that is Omaha. Omaha, they feel like they have reservations every year at hotels. Feels like the fans kind of book it, in February. Hey, you want to go to Omaha this year in June? All right, well, I'll book a reservation. I'll book the Marriott, right? I mean, it's not like it's their first rodeo like Kentucky. It's not like, they haven't been here in a while either. So like that experience here, not being afraid of the big moment, not playing on the biggest stage is a huge factor for me and huge factor in college baseball, I believe.
Harrison, when it comes to sleeper for me, I mean, I think Virginia is a great pick, by the way. I mean, you look at the gambling odds, again, they're one of the lowest on the totem pole when it comes to, and one of the best value plays, I think. So I think Virginia is a great pick by you.
And I know our friend Steven Schott will be happy to hear that as well.
Oh, he'll be thrilled, no doubt. But when I'm looking at this, the dark horse, the sleeper of who could win it all, I mean, how can I not go with Florida, man? How can I not go?
How much of that rides on your ticket, though?
Well, I mean, sure, it helps, but I'm just saying, and again, this isn't a pick, but if I'm just going with the ultimate dark horse here, give me the dark horse that has maybe the best player in college baseball on its roster in Jack Caglione. Give me the dark horse that, is as hot as any team in the country that's playing with a chip on their shoulder of we weren't supposed to be here. I don't know if you saw this, by the way, Harrison. I love these optics going in. I get what the analytics tell you. I hear you out in the percentages, but I saw a post on Instagram from Jack Caglione, and the caption he put was, they shouldn't be in like the uppercase, lowercase letters, like mocking the we shouldn't be in. Love that. That team is playing with swag. They've got their swagger back. Like Florida's got their swagger back. They got Ashton Wilson all of a sudden hitting bombs. Brody Donay is a monster. Dale Thompson in the bottom of the lineup. Michael Robinson. The whole lineup is smashing.
Whether it's a bomb box or not.
Jack Caglione, don't even waste your time pitching a Jack Caglione. It's a waste of time.
Don't try to body him up down the line either.
Don't do that. Yeah, everybody in the College World Series.
We saw it in the Clemson Super Regional. Just like the toughness and kind of grit that they have to go along with that talented roster. And in that Super Regional game too, I was standing next to the dugout in the media well, and it just like the team felt super close and just felt connected and felt, obviously everyone's driven to the same goal, but they just felt so close. And just that culture, that dugout culture, that clubhouse culture felt very strong and prevalent.
Yeah. So, I mean, I love the energy and the moxie they're playing with right now. So again, it's not a pick, but you're giving me a dark horse.
It's a really good dark horse.
Let me go with the darkest of the dark horses that are available, and I'll take the Florida Gators. Harrison, let's talk most important player or players of the College World Series. Like, who is the X factor? Who's the dude that's going to help determine who wins the College World Series? And I've got one, Harrison, I want to start because you mentioned the curse of the number one seed, right? It hasn't been broken. For me, the X factor in this College World Series, and I know you probably thought I was going to go Jack Caglione, and you very well may as well, and that's not a bad pick. But for me, talking to Tennessee folks and looking at Tennessee, and to your point, they're complete. They can pitch it, they can hit it, they can field it, they can do everything. The X factor in this College World Series that I'm looking at, and if you tell me this guy's lights out, I'd tell you at minimum Tennessee's going to be in the finals. That's Drew Beam for Tennessee. Because
I knew you were going there. I would say agree. I agree.
I think his last 13 innings, he's given up something like 14 earned runs. He just has not been himself. The last 13 innings pitched has not been all that great. Tennessee is winning despite it. But if they can get the best version of Drew Beam, I think Tennessee is going to be really, really difficult to beat. So
smart man.
If there's one guy looking at the X factor, it's Drew Beam for Tennessee.
Yeah, and I think that's a fantastic point of view and X factor because, if you say Christian Moore, one of the best left-handers in the country, okay, well, if he has a bad series,
right?
Yeah. If he has a bad series, 8 through 9 or 2 through 9 can all mash. Mm-hmm. Someone else can step up, but on the mound, it's a whole different ballgame. That's why I think, like we talked about, pitching coaches making great head coaches. The game management is completely different. And when you're on the mound, it's you and the batter. And you're involved in every single pitch.
Yeah, so I think Beam is a great pick. I'm glad you agree. I mean, obviously Jack Caglione is one, but again, to your point, Harrison, he's just one guy in the lineup. I mean, obviously the way he throws in the ball. I could say actually, Harrison.
Technically, it's two guys on Sundays.
I could say Liam Peterson's an X factor because if they can get a quality start out of him, right, in that first game. And I mean, obviously getting up 1-0 is massive, right? And then you've got Jack Caglione in the bump. That to me is the biggest question for Florida is just, Liam Peterson he looked lost out there at Clemson. I mean, he looked completely lost. They won anyway, scored 12 runs or whatever. I think he's an X factor in this one. I think Vance Honeycutt at North Carolina, obviously the stars, right? In this type of tournament, College World Series, you need your best players to play their best. So I think Vance Honeycutt's another one. I think the back end of Texas A&M's bullpen, right? Chris Cortez is one that I think you could look at, and he's going to be an X factor. The guy who was Aschenbeck?
Evan Aschenbeck?
Aschenbeck, I think he's an X factor as well, like the back end of that bullpen. So I think there's a number of directions you can go, but you and I agree. Great minds think alike. I just think if Drew Beam is on, I do think this could be the first time in 25 years we get that one seed winning it all.
Yeah, Chris. And to touch on my X factors for each of the other teams kind of briefly. I mean, obviously for North Carolina, it's Vance Honeycutt. It's easy to say that being the best player, but just like the energy that he possesses and puts out to the rest of the team into the game against your opponents, right? It's on both sides of the ball, defensively and offensively. He is the core and the heart of that team. And it feels like everything kind of revolves around how well he plays. I feel like I don't want to say that's an easy kind of cop out, but that's literally how it's been felt this season watching North Carolina baseball. As for Virginia, Jay Wolford, because if he can continue pitching how he has in the postseason, the bats are going to do their thing, right? One guy could have, Griffin O'Farrell just have okay, or a bad day. The rest of the line around is going to pick him up, right? I mean, you got Henry Ford. I mean, legendary name too. I mean, I think he's one of their top two, if not one bats. But then the pitching side, if he can continue pitching at an elite caliber level at which he does, Virginia's got a really, really strong shot to win this whole thing. And why I think they're with the dark horse. As for Tennessee, definitely Drew Beam. Florida State, it's Carson Dorsey for me, Chris. It's not Jamie Arnold, and it's not James Tibbs III. It's Carson Dorsey, because if he can pitch at a high caliber level, we've seen he did it in the regional. He threw 8 2/3, almost a complete game. And then he pitched well in the Super, but just dominating the regional. If they can get him to pitch at a high caliber level throughout this tournament in Omaha, I mean, they're gonna be hard to beat, if not harder to beat than anyone. I mean, and that's for bracket one. That's kind of the X factors for me, Chris.
Mm-hmm. And those all make sense too. Again, a lot of great players, and sometimes, like you mentioned, Vance Honeycutt, it's kind of the cop-out answer, but sometimes you just don't have to overthink it, right? I mean, again, for Florida, X factor, Jack Caglione. It's like you don't have to really overthink. Yeah. When you got a guy like that, he's got to play his best for you to have a shot.
Yeah, Chris. Line. I mean, you could say Jack Caglione, but I think you're not going to have a bad outing or him on the bump and a bad, series week from him at the plate. You might have one, but you won't have both. But you might have both being incredible. We've seen him do it all year long, right? So for me, it's between Liam Peterson or Brandon Neely.
Yeah, Neely's a good one. Yeah.
Holding the line for 4 innings game one of the Super, then 4 innings or shut out in 4 innings of the first Super Regional game, and then holding the line of 4 innings and saving the bullpen. End up kind of, I think he got the win. I can't remember if he technically did or not, but in game 2 and to getting out some big spots. So it's one of those two for me, and just he's the heart and soul of that bullpen and kind of the go-to guy. He is the go-to guy. Yeah. For A&M, Chris, it's not a player. It's not a name, but it's a player. And it's whoever that player is that steps up in place of Shane Sado behind Ryan Prager. Ryan Prager did not pitch well in Supers. I think he'll bounce back from that. It's going to be tough to do against the Florida lineup, but it's whoever steps up behind him in that next start, because the bullpen's as deep as it gets, right? They have 2 of the premium arms in Chris Cortez and then Evan Aschenbeck, who's just he's a Swiss Army knife in the bullpen, can do it all. He can go long, short, close, big situations, slam the door, anything. And then, NC State, you could go a bunch of different routes. It feels like for me, X factor, it's really tough. Because if you look at it, Chris, how many times have you looked at NC State's lineup and it doesn't feel like it's, a bunch of big names? It's not a high caliber, team. It feels like it doesn't have top 10 draft prospects. It doesn't have, anyone, leading the league in home runs, leading the league in RBIs, leading the league in whatever. It doesn't feel like that. It's just, you talk about it, a gritty team that, it is the way I think you explained it to me the other day when we were recapping the Supers. The sum is greater than the whole. Sorry, the whole, the sum of the pieces as a whole is greater than the individual.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of pedigree that Coach Elliott Avant has had for this team. And just, it's a lot of veteran guys, right? Georgia, it felt like a lot younger, kind of newer transfers, everything they made it, and they meshed and did great. But this NC State team, the adversity they've overcome, losing several players throughout the year, and just the clutchness they've had against series, against half the ACC teams left, they've beaten. They split with Florida State. They beat the rest in the series, right? It feels just like they'd have overcome as much adversity as anyone. For me, the X factor is just clutch adversity for them, it feels. And then for Kentucky, it's Trey Poozer.
Yeah.
He sets the tone. He sets the tone for them game one, and has been it felt like he's pitching his best all year in his whole collegiate career, Chris. So those are my X factors for each team.
Yeah, I like Poozer from Kentucky as well. I do agree with you. Starting pitching for Kentucky is going to be massive. Guys, again, these games start opening round on Friday and Saturday, 1 o'clock and 6 o'clock. First pitches local time. That's Central Time, 2 and 7 Eastern Time. And again, guys, betting lines will be out over at MyBookie. We'll have run spreads and totals and all that good stuff. And you can go to mybookie.ag and place those bets. That being said, Harrison, like I mentioned to you guys, we're not going to go through the entire bracket here because Harrison and I are going to be coming back to you this time next week to break everything down, preview the final series, of course, the College World Series final, I should say. But with that being said, we are going to pick these 4 opening round games, and we'll start with the action on Friday. Again, 1 o'clock local time. These games are all on ESPN. Harrison, let's start North Carolina, Virginia, first game of the College World Series. Which way are you going here? I'm going to go with the North Carolina Tar Heels. I like UNC. I think they're, again, one of the most complete teams in the College World Series. I know Virginia can swing it, but UNC can as well. I'm going to go with the Tar Heels. Who's your pick here in this one?
Yeah, Chris. I mean, this is really tough. These feel like just two elite level clubs. All of them here are elite, but just feel like it's the clutchness that both of them had. The head coaching's there. The pitching's has grown for both of them. More so for the Tar Heels, it's the bullpen and just slamming the door shut, led by Dalton Pence. They're stud at the bullpen, right? And for Virginia, like we talked about, the pitching staff has really stepped up to kind of help support that hitting. For me, I think it's Virginia in game one. Who I lean Virginia. This is a nail biter for me. I think it's going to be a clutch RBI in the 8th inning to lift Virginia. I could see it the other way around, but I just think Virginia comes out and has that extra clutch AB to win a 1-run game.
And on a side note, Harrison, I meant to ask you this before, and you mentioned how great of a game this is going to be. What's your most intriguing game of the opening round? Is it this North Carolina-Virginia game, or would you go one of the other 3 games that we've got on the Friday-Saturday slate?
Chris, you're putting me in a tough spot here with this because I don't think any of these answers are wrong, whichever game you pick.
There is not a wrong answer here.
I'll give you one from each bracket. How about that?
All right, fair enough.
So from bracket 1, neither one's a wrong answer, but I think it is going to be this North Carolina-Virginia game. I just think the styles in which they play complement and compete against each other, and it's going to be really interesting to see how strategic each coach is with Brian O'Connor for Virginia and Scott Forbes for UNC. So it's going to be super interesting. But, I mean, if Tennessee-Florida State is the most exciting game, would not surprise me a single bit. But just leading off the College World Series, that setting that tone, I think in that game one, the jitters, the excitement, the atmosphere, it's going to be unbelievable. And for bracket 2, it's got to be the night. It's got to be the last one, Chris. A&M, Florida. Just the high caliber talent, the styles of play, just the studs all over the field. Just the pedigree of each team, and obviously the head coaching as well. It's going to be an electric atmosphere.
The only one I disagree with you with, Harrison, is bracket 1. I would go Tennessee, Florida State, just because I'm curious how Tennessee, and we're going to get that pick in just a second, as Tennessee begins their quest as the number 1 seed. But I would agree with you. I'd say the most intriguing game of the 4 is Texas A&M, Florida. I just because of the story of Florida, I'm curious what A&M looks like again without Braden Montgomery, without Sadu at the back end of the bullpen. But I'd go with that one. I'm fascinated by the Florida Gators. I'm totally fascinated. We'll get into that game in a second.
The unknown factor and just how you don't know what you're going to get, but they keep proving people wrong.
Right, exactly. We'll get in that game in a second. Let's jump to, Harrison, the Friday night game. Tennessee and Florida State. FSU, the magic of Mike Martin. Tennessee, the number 1 overall national seed. Like you mentioned, Harrison, none of these games are snoozers. They're all elite matchups. This one included. I am going to go with the Tennessee Volunteers. I think they will outswing FSU. I think there's going to be a lot of offense. I think they will outswing FSU in this one, and I think Tennessee will start the College World Series 1-0.
Smart man right there, because I'm going with Tennessee as well. I think they're just a little bit deeper on the offensive side, and then the pitching. I mean, the pitching for me is are they going to start Chris Stamos again and kind of open him into AJ Causey? I'm really, really interested to see if that's good, because they felt like they've been doing that the second half of the season. I don't love it, Chris. I don't love doing that. And you're going to get Jamie Arnold in game 1 for Florida State. I'm
not a big fan of openers either. I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm just not.
It's one thing to do in the regular season, to do in Omaha.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that they've kind of tracked that way to doing it the rest of the season, but I think you just let AJ Causey start, and you go AJ Causey, just his pedigree and dominance as a pitcher and his funky arm slot and delivery. It's hard to pick up against Jamie Arnold. I think if you do like Nerfies, and then it is a line, I'd say probably take a Nerfie in that. I'd say look at it at least. No runs first inning. If it's those two with Jamie Arnold, he's going to be electric to see. I think Tennessee, it's going to be a different style of arm that they haven't seen, so it'll be a really intriguing matchup. But like I said, I think they're just a little bit deeper in the bottom of the lineup than Florida State, just barely. And I mean, you look at home runs as well. They outslug Florida State. They outslug them, Chris, and that's huge for me. I mean, it's a huge thing, and the ball's going to fly here, it feels like. So
yeah. It's normally interesting at the College World Series at Charles Schwab. It's, we think of this massive ballpark, but with the way college baseball is now, you're going to see bombs. We're going to see bombs. There's no question about that.
The weather too is going to be a question, because it's supposed to. I mean, early in this tournament, it's supposed to have some rain in the forecast. We're hoping that kind of goes away, but we don't want any late night games starting. I mean, it's going to be so much fun though, Chris. I mean, like I said, the runs are going to come. It feels like an offensive year, especially even with the power arms. It feels like an offensive year, just because you kind of hold the line against those power arms, and you get to the bullpens, and you kind of try to beat up on the bullpens. And Tennessee is one of the best in the country to do that. They've had 50 more home runs than Florida State this year. They're 72% better at creating runs than the average team, and Florida State's 55% better at creating runs. So advantage on both of those to Tennessee.
Harrison, that being said, let's go to the Saturday games. Again, this is still the opening round, of course. Kentucky, NC State is the first game of the day. Again, 1 o'clock local time, first pitch, 2 o'clock Eastern on ESPN. And if you love old school, old-fashioned baseball, bunting, small ball, stealing bases, making plays, this is the game for you, because Kentucky and NC State, very similar styles, Harrison. They're both death by 1,000 cuts. That's how both these teams play. They're going to out-fundamental you, it seems, at every turn. So I'm fascinated by the overall style that these two teams play and what we're going to get in this matchup. And this is a tough pick for me. NC State's another one of these teams. I don't know if Team of Destiny vibe is quite right, but I think, you have to think about what happened the last time NC State was in the College World Series back in 2021 when the whole COVID-19 thing happened and they got jobbed. They're going to have that chip on their shoulder. And then you got Kentucky, who they've never been here before. They've literally never been to Omaha. So I'm curious with Kentucky, how do they handle the spotlight, playing in front of 25,000? You'll hear a lot of times, Harrison, for teams that you need to get to that big stage first and lose and get that experience before you're able to break through win it all. Now, that might just be something people tell themselves, but you hear that in the NBA, the Super Bowl, whatever, that like that stage is just so – it's such a large thing. It's such a big thing to take on that you need to get that experience first. How true is that? I have no idea. So in this game, Kentucky, NC State, I go back and forth on this one, man, honestly. I love what I've seen from Kentucky's starting pitching. I think Trey Poozer, Mason Moore, it's going to be Poozer, we'd imagine, this game. But as I mentioned before, Harrison, I think at this point I am contractually obligated to pick against the Kentucky Wildcats because I picked them to lose their regional. They won. I picked them to lose their own super, and they won. So I'm going to pick NC State here because if I don't, I think Kentucky fans in Omaha might have my neck for it if I were to pick them and they lost. So I'm going to go NC State. And realistically, I think it's a coin flip game. I think NC State absolutely, with the mojo they're playing with, could win this ball game. But, yeah, I'll go with the Wolfpack here.
Chris, you just seem like you're trying to please the Kentucky Lexington.
I'm not pleasing them. I'm just going with what's been working.
Pleasing them by not picking them. I mean, if it works, it works,
I mean, just saying. I mean,
so if they keep winning, you're just going to pick them. You're going to pick against them every time.
That's it. That's it. Yep, that's it. No, listen, I'm going NC State. I think Kentucky first game in Omaha. I think those first game jitters are going to be there. I think the mentality is much different for NC State. So I'm going to go NC State. So it's a real pick, but it's kind of ironic how this has been going. Just to where every time I pick against Kentucky, they win. So, but no, I am really going NC State. I think, again, being on this stage before is going to help the Wolfpack. I think they take down Kentucky game 1.
Even though it's not a lot of the same team from that 21 year.
I think still. I think that the overall feeling.
It was Elliott Avant, though, head coach.
It was Elliott Avant. So,
in the wise, legendary words of Lee Corso, not so fast, my friend, because I am riding with the Kentucky Wildcats like I have done in this regional, in the super regional, and they've proven me right. They've proven why continuously. They've proven people wrong all year. Most quad 1 wins in D1 baseball, the best quad 1 win record as well to go with it. But for me, Chris, in this matchup, it leans on pitching. Trey Poozer in game 1 with a sub-3 ERA against, I expect it to be Sam Heifel for NC State. They're leading caliber arm innings-wise, and it feels like start-wise, they're both tied at 16. But he got just a tiny bit over a 5 ERA with almost 1.5 whip, and Trey Poozer's a 1 flat whip. I mean, for me, it's going to be pitching longevity. NC State had to play an extra game in that game 3. Kentucky did it in 2. I think Kentucky, Mingione is going to have them rolling into Omaha. Hey, no fear. We're meant to be here. We're not just we got here. That was a goal. That's not the end goal, right? I just think like Nick Mingione has proven people wrong all year. He was SEC Coach of the Year. I think he was for the regular season Coach of the Year as well. Just an unbelievable job he's done. I mean, NC State is a better home run hitting team the last 10 games as well as this season by about 10, 15 home runs in the last 10 and overall the season. But just the pitching depth and the longevity of the starters for Kentucky with Trey Poozer on the mound, the College of Charleston transfer has he has made himself some money this year, Chris. He's going to get drafted and he's done such a fantastic job of developing further at Kentucky and leading the staff. He sets the tone for Kentucky each week in the series. He's going to set the tone for them here in Omaha with a win over NC State.
It's a good pick.
Looking at it right now, Chris, at the analytics, if you put them head to head in a matchup, Kentucky's minus 110 with about a 6.5 score is what analytics are looking at. So,
very interesting matchup because I feel like Kentucky and NC State both have been proving people wrong. It seems at every time.
It's going to be fun to watch because I was in Athens for the Super Regional Game 3 at NC State. I told you every ball they hit was about 100 miles per hour or more off the bat. Mm-hmm. I want to see how that plays in Omaha. And it's going to be fun to watch.
Mm-hmm. And the final game, Harrison, of the opening round on Saturday night, Texas A&M and the Florida Gators will do battle again. This was the first SEC series of the season for these two respective teams. Again, these teams have changed a lot since mid-March or so. Harrison, I'm going to be short and sweet with this one. Give me the team of destiny, the Florida Gators, who are riding high right now. Like we mentioned, Braden Montgomery, he's not playing in the College World Series. Sadu in the back end of the bullpen's not available. Texas A&M is still one of the best teams in this field. They're one of the most complete teams in this field. But that matters. But this time of year also, momentum, mojo, moxie, that matters too. And so I'm going with the Florida Gators. This is another team, Harrison, I have doubted at every turn this postseason. You, my friend, have not. You have called this run, which has been wildly impressive. I'm jumping on the bandwagon now. I'm going with Florida in this first game. I think if Florida fizzles out, it will be later in the tournament when the pitching starts to dwindle. But I think this first game, all hands on deck, everybody's ready to go. I think Florida will have enough. They're riding high right now. I think they take down Texas A&M in that first game.
Really interesting, Chris, because I do have the Florida Gators as well winning this one.
Oh, here we go.
And for me, a lot of it's that moxie mojo coming into Omaha. They're coming in hot. They're coming in playing their best ball they have all year. A&M, you lose an All-American in Braden Montgomery, the center piece of your lineup, that 3-hole. And then you lose Shane Sado. I mean, just like I think that in the back of your head, that does matter. I mean, obviously, it's also motivation. We're doing this for Beaumont. We're doing this for Shane as well. But I mean, Ryan Prager's struggles on the mound to start Friday night, it's just a little bit concerning. I mean, you could say the same thing for Liam Peterson. So for me, it's going to come down. What comes down to, Chris, is the bullpen. The bullpen's trying to save the starting pitching because both these teams can mash with the best of them, Chris. I mean, it's unbelievable. They have two of the most high-powered offenses in college baseball the entire season, it feels like, right? On paper, at least. It's going to come down to the bullpen. It's going to come down to Chris Cortez and Evan Ashenbach for A&M because you got to win game one. You have to win game one to go to set yourself up for the most success possible. Here in Omaha, we've seen it year after year. They're going to try to use those two guys. Those are their 2 1-2 punch guys. In Florida, it's going to go right to Brendan Neely. Their bread and butter. It feels like their heart and soul on the pitching staff. It's just a veteran kind of player he is, and the ability and the job he's able to do, being called on whenever, however, and for 80 pitches on back-to-back days, he'll do it. It's going to come down to those bullpens, and I just think someone it could be a Brody Donnet, it could be anyone, but it could be an Ashton Wilson. I think just Florida string together 2 clutch hits late, in some place, or just has, does it early, and then A&M just can't catch up because Brandon Neely, I think, shuts it down a little bit more and quiets that A&M lineup. I think it's going to be a higher scoring game. I mean, analytics only show it to be about a 7-5 game with the minus 162 when expected line for Texas A&M, actually, when you put Liam Peterson against Ryan Prager. But, that's not always how it works, especially in Omaha on the road. I mean, anything can happen. Kevin O'Sullivan has done a fantastic job. It's going to be an electric game. It's going to be an awesome game, like we talked about. Maybe probably the best one to cap the night off. And I just think Florida pulls away and stays hot right here in this first game.
Yeah, A&M is a fantastic club. Florida is a buzzsaw right now that I think nobody wants to see. And, I think to your point, I think the second they get the lead in that game, if it's past the 5th inning on, you're going to see Brandon Neely come out of that bullpen, and they're going to say, hey, we're going to ride you kind of like the Clemson series. We're going to ride you as long as we can. Go shut it down, young fella, and get us to 1-0. That's going to be the game plan. So, yeah, and again, like I mentioned, I think it is the most fascinating game. I think it's going to be an electric ball game. These two teams are much different, like I mentioned, in mid-March, and it's going to be great on great when it comes to these two teams playing each other. So, yeah. So, Harrison,
we can't wait for it, Chris. It's going to be
it's going to be awesome. Like I mentioned, guys, we're going to make the rest of predictions and obviously preview and predict the finals series this time next week. But with that being said, Harrison, now all that's left is to hop on that plane and go to Omaha. My friend, final thoughts on the College World Series and what awaits us at Charles Schwab Field in Omaha, Nebraska.
Yeah, Chris, there's no better time to watch college baseball than a couple years ago. It's like planting a tree. The best time to plant a tree 20 years ago. The next best time right now. And if you haven't been watching college baseball, this is the best time to start watching college baseball. The best talent in the country playing at the highest level, playing for a national championship. This is better than the Final Four. You get 8 teams in a bracket, not a one and done. You get the storylines, you get the fans, the atmosphere, the tradition, the history of college baseball, Omaha, Nebraska, everything, Chris. It is fascinating. It is incredible. College baseball is growing exponentially. Join it, be a part of it, watch college baseball.
Watch college baseball, and we will see you in Omaha indeed. Well said, Harrison. Again, appreciate you guys all tuning in. Make sure you stay tuned, guys, to all of our content. Content going to be bleeding out of the eyeballs while we're there in Omaha, Nebraska at the College World Series. We're also going to have instant game reactions after every game. Again, guys, we're going to have all kinds of stuff. So the best way, just follow along, subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to YouTube, all that good stuff. And again, make sure you subscribe, you rate, all that good stuff. Check out the pod. Check us out on social media, and check us out at SECUnfiltered.com. And check out our friends at MyBookie, mybookie.ag. Use that promo code SECU to get your special welcome offer and your first deposit. We're going to be giving gambling plays, different lines, totals, all kinds of stuff. It's going to be an absolute blast. Guys, thank you all so much for tuning in. Enjoy the College World Series. Invest your time into college baseball.
You won't be disappointed.
This next 10 days is going to be an absolute electric factor. Guys, again, thank you all so much for tuning in. For Harrison Fant, I'm Chris Phillips. We appreciate each and every single one of you, and we'll see you in Omaha, Nebraska.